Hey everyone, how y'all doing? Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm doing my December wrap up. So this wrap up is a bit delayed, but I've been feeling quite burnt out after Vlogmas, so I'm back making videos again. I'm very tired, but I am very excited to talk about all the books that I read in December. I did a weekly vlog in December with a couple of additional vlogs in between those, so I am gonna link those vlogs down below if you guys want to go watch those if you haven't already. So the first 3 books I read, I actually read a lot more than this, but I felt weird counting a bunch of them. I did do a reading vlog where I was reading a bunch of old favorite childhood Christmas books, so I'll make sure to link that one up specifically in the cards for you guys. So within that, I read June to Be First Grader, Jingle Bells, Batman Smells, P.S. So Does May by Barbara Park. I also read Stanley's Christmas Adventure by Jeff Brown, and I also read Snowmen at Christmas, along with like a bunch of other random Christmas picture books. But I just had such a good time doing that vlog. It's one of my favorite vlogs that I did in the month of December, just because it was so much fun to revisit old favorite Christmas books, and it was just a really fun time. So if you guys have not checked out that vlog yet, I highly recommend it. I know it's Christmas themed, so like I understand if you don't want to watch it, but I had such a good time with it. Then the next book I read was In a Holidays by Christina Lauren. This is a Christmas romance book. So we follow our main character, Maylin Jones, and every year for Christmas, her and her family always meet up with some of their family friends and they stay at a cabin together. But this Christmas, it is their last Christmas because the family friend who owns the cabin has decided to sell it. And so on the way home from Christmas, Maylin is feeling very sad knowing that that was her last Christmas at the cabin, and they end up getting in a car accident, and she wakes up like 6 days prior, I think, back on the plane when they were on their way to the cabin for Christmas. So she ends up in this like Groundhog Day situation where she is like doomed to relive the day over and over again until she like manages to fix it somehow. In 2020, I became obsessed with adult romances, and this one was no exception. I had heard so many amazing things about Christina Lauren. They are an author duo, and so this was my first book by them and I was really excited for it. And yeah, I adored it so much. It was so cheesy and so like, I don't know, just like your average like romance kind of story. Like it was very cliche, very cheesy, but I kind of loved it for that. But it does have like cheesiness in it and very like cliche ending, but I was just living for it. I absolutely adored it. I fell completely in love with the family friend dynamics in this book. I could just really feel how close they all were, and I also just really enjoyed the romance. There was a slight love triangle in this book that I felt like we either could have done without, or it could have been fleshed out a bit more, but it didn't bother me while I was reading. It's just kind of something I've noticed in hindsight after reading the book. But I just think that the writing was really well done. The story I felt like was well told for the most part, and overall I just had a really fun time with this book, and I'm so happy that I picked it up, and I can't wait to read more Christina Lauren in the future. The next book I read was The Red Scrolls of Magic by Cassandra Clare. I can't really talk too much about this book because obviously we all know that Cassandra Clare's Shadowhunter books all intertwine with each other, so I can't really talk too much about this book without spoiling things. But we're basically just following Magnus and Alec while they go on a vacation together, their first vacation as a couple. It kind of takes place, I believe, between City of Glass and City of Fallen Angels. I was kind of hesitant going into this book because I've heard a lot of like kind of like meh reviews on it. Like a lot of people just kind of feel okay towards this series. A lot of complaints that I had heard were that there was just no sense of urgency within the book because it takes place so early on in the Mortal Instruments that we know everything's gonna be okay. Like we know where these characters are years down the line from when this book takes place, and so we know that nothing terrible is gonna happen to them. So we're really just along for the ride, and I definitely agree with those like critiques that there's no sense of urgency whatsoever. Like any like high like stake moment, I was like, they're gonna be okay. Like I'm not worried whatsoever. So I kind of wish Cassandra Clare had published this earlier on in the series, like maybe in between the Mortal Instruments books, I don't know, or maybe just not written them at all. I just feel like this book was not necessary. I mean, I also did listen to it through audiobook, and I'd never done that for Cassandra Clare's books before, and so it kind of felt weird to hear characters that I've known and loved for so long in a different voice than what I'm used to in my head. So maybe that just wasn't the right move for this book. I am still looking forward to the second book and seeing if I like it better. I will definitely be reading that one physically just to kind of see if it's a better experience. But overall, this book was just, it was just kind of there. I wasn't that into it, but I also didn't hate it. It was just kind of there. It's definitely, I think, my least favorite Cassandra Clare book, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. Goodbye Days by Jeff Zentner. This is a book I've had on my TBR for 3+ years now. It's an art copy that I received in an event 3 years ago. Technically 4 years ago now. Wow, okay, so 4 years ago I got this book at an event, and this book literally came out in March 2017, but I finally read it in December, and it's basically following our main character Carver, and he is grappling with feelings of grief and guilt because his 3 best friends have just been killed in a car accident, and he feels responsible for that because they were texting while they were driving and he was the one texting them, and he feels all this guilt because, and it's also him dealing with the fact that all 3 of his best friends and his only friends are now all gone from the world, and he's kind of left alone. And then basically he ends up going on these series of goodbye days with his friends' families. It's a sad book, but I just felt so let down by this book for some reason. Like, I just had expectations for it because I'd had it on my shelf for so long, and I thought it was gonna be like this big heartbreaking book, and honestly I just didn't really care. I basically just couldn't connect with the characters. I didn't care about them whatsoever. There were moments of sadness where, like, in general, I'm like, oh yeah, this is sad, but I wasn't necessarily feeling for the characters themselves. I was more just like sympathetic for the situations that they were in and the feelings that they were having, but overall, like, I didn't actually care about the individual characters themselves. So overall, this book was just not my cup of tea. I also didn't really like the writing. It was so disappointing. And then the next book, which is a stark contrast to the one I just talked about, is Wonder by R.J. Palacio. This was a reread for me. It is also my favorite book of all time. If you have spent any time at all on my channel, you know how much I love this book. I am pretty sure I mentioned it in almost every single Vlogmas video. I just love it so much. So this book follows our main character Augie, and he has a facial deformity that he was born with, and because of this he's never gone to a public school due to all of his surgeries that he's had to go through. It just never made sense to send him to school, but now his surgeries have started to slow down, his health is pretty good, and his family decides that he should go to public school for the first time for 5th grade. So he goes to public school for the first time for 5th grade, and he ends up being bullied and has to deal with like all of these things and making friends, and it's such a beautiful story. It's so heartwarming, but also it's heartbreaking in moments. But overall, this book is just so touching and so beautiful, and I literally never get tired of reading it. I did vlog my experience reading this book in one of my weekly vlogs last month, and I sobbed, and you know what, guys, I saved you from the worst of that crying. Like, I cut out big like hysterical sobs out of that video because it just felt like too much to share on the internet. But this book just, like, it hits me different every single time I read it, and I also just appreciate it so much because I can literally connect to any character in this book almost, and connect to all their different stories and how they feel, and I'm like, I can connect almost every single character in this book, and it's just like one of my favorite feelings reading it. I don't know, this book is just such a comfort, and in the year of 2020 I really just needed to fall back into the story and like connect with Augie again. It's just such a beautiful story, and I will literally never shut up about this book, so I'm just gonna move on, but I loved it a lot. So then I read some more Christmas themed books for another reading vlog. I did a 24-hour readathon vlog. So within that I read A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. I also read One Day in December by Josie Silver, and I read part of The Afterlife of Polly Chase during that vlog and then finished it afterwards. So for A Christmas Carol, didn't really enjoy it. It felt like pulling teeth almost. I do love the story of A Christmas Carol, but I think I'm gonna stick to watching adaptations of it because I just didn't click with the writing style. I felt like I was about to fall asleep during the entire ebook, so I just, no thank you. One Day in December, it started off kind of rocky where I wasn't really enjoying it, and I was just kind of like, don't really want to be reading this, but it was an audiobook, so it was like a really quick listen, and I ended up becoming invested by the end. I wouldn't consider it a favorite, and I don't think I'm ever going to purchase it for myself, but I do think that I would reread it one day, but also through the audiobook again, because I did quite enjoy the narration of it. It felt very conversational, and it just felt like they were real people instead of someone narrating the story to me. It felt like the characters were actually talking to me, which was cool. So by the end I did become invested and I did enjoy the story, but overall it's not like my favorite romance I read last year. And then we have The Afterlife of Polly Chase, which was a reread for me, and I just love this book so much. I just realized I didn't describe what any of those books were about. Christmas Carol, we all know what it's about. Scrooge, visited by 3 ghosts, ends up becoming a good guy. Then we have One Day in December, which is about these 2 people who kind of just have this fleeting moment at a bus stop together, and then they meet later later on because the guy ends up dating the main character's best friend, and it's just kind of like the story that spans like 10 years or something. I don't know. But then this one is a Christmas Carol kind of retelling almost. We follow our main character Holly Chase, and she is a Scrooge through and through. She gets visited on Christmas Eve by the 3 ghosts. They tell her if you don't change your ways you are going to die. She doesn't listen, doesn't believe them, and then she ends up dying. And then she's recruited by Project Scrooge to be the new ghost of Christmas past to help future Scrooges change their ways. It's a really cool story. I absolutely adore it, and I reread it every single Christmas. And the next book I read was The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. This was another reread for me, and I also listened to this one on audio. So I read this book for the first time back in September. This is an ARC copy of the book, so I read it early. I do have a whole reading vlog on this book if you want to see my initial reactions to reading it. I'll link that up above in the cards. But I wanted to reread it because I wanted to solidify if it actually was a favorite book of the year or not. It was. Spoiler alert, you guys can also check out that video. I'll link it down below. I absolutely adore this book. We basically follow our main character Addie LaRue. She makes a deal with the darkness so that she'll live forever, but she ends up being cursed to be forgotten by everyone she meets until one day somebody does remember her, and it's just such a beautiful story. Victoria Schwab has just gorgeous, lush writing that I'm just obsessed with, but also just great storytelling in general. I love the characters, love the whole story behind it. It's very, very character driven. Like, the plot is very, very subtle. It's more so like about the characters and their journeys, which I really enjoy. I had a great time with this book. I definitely recommend it, and I'm so happy that I reread it, and I already want to reread it, and you can best believe I'll be rereading it again this year. So I absolutely adore this book. I reread a lot of books in December because the next book I read was Landline by Rainbow Rowell. This is like my 4th time reading it maybe. I also read it every single Christmas if I can because it is like a Christmas book. It takes place at Christmas. I also listened to this one on audio. That has kind of become my preferred way to read it. I just really like how the narrator tells the story. This one basically follows our main character Georgie, and she's supposed to be going to her in-laws house for the holidays, but she ends up having to stay home for Christmas to write some scripts for a show that she wants to write, and so she ends up staying home. He goes off with the kids to his parents' house, and Georgie kind of like grapples with her marriage and these feelings of her marriage falling apart, and then she ends up picking up the landline at her childhood home, and she calls her husband, and when he picks up, it's her husband from the past when they were dating instead of her husband from current day. That was a really bad description, I'm so sorry, but I love this book. I really like the characters and all the conversations around marriage and relationships. I don't know, I really like this book. It's really fun, and I'm really happy that I got around to rereading it. The next book I read was Instant Karma by Marissa Meyer. So this is Marissa Meyer's like first contemporary book, although it does have elements of like magic, I guess, in it. So I don't know how to describe this book, so I'm just gonna read bits and pieces from the description. But Prudence is an overachiever, and she's very quick to pass judgment on people. Her dreams of karmic justice are fulfilled when, after a night out with her friends, she wakes up with the sudden ability to cast instant karma on those around her. She ends up using her power on people, but the only person it doesn't work on is Quint Erickson, which is her slacker lab partner. And so she ends up working at a rescue center for extra credit for school, and she begins to uncover some truths about some things. So I overall did really enjoy this book, but at the same time I was kind of annoyed for a lot of it because the instant karma, like obviously when you go into a book, it's called Instant Karma. Really the only thing the description talks about is her power of instant karma, but it's really like a subplot of the book. Like, it's definitely not the main part of the story whatsoever, and it kind of felt like an afterthought. And I've talked about this with my friend Lisa, who also read this book, and she also agreed that it definitely felt like something that was added afterwards and could definitely have been taken out, and this book could have just been rebranded, and the things that happen in this book because of the instant karma could have just happened a different way. The instant karma just didn't really add anything for me. It felt just really out of place and weird, and to me it kind of just felt like Marissa Meyer wasn't totally comfortable writing a contemporary book, and she wanted to add some sort of magic in it so that she could feel more comfortable, and it just didn't really work. So that kind of annoyed me. And then also just in general, I wasn't really hooked in the story until maybe about halfway through, and then I started to get invested in the characters, but before that, like, I just really wasn't that interested. So I have very weird feelings about this book, but overall I did really enjoy it, so I'm happy that I read it and like pushed through and got through like my iffy feelings at the beginning. But overall, this book is definitely not my favorite Marissa Meyer book. I would argue it's probably one of my least favorites, which is just really unfortunate, but I just feel like it really could have done without having the instant karma in there. Like, it just did nothing for me. And then the last book, I don't really want to talk about it because I'm really upset, but I read Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi. So if you don't know what this book is about, we're basically in this world where magic used to exist, but the king took it away, and our main character is trying to get that magic back. It's kind of like the bare bones of what the story is. And I have been anticipating this book since it came out in 2018. I've been obsessed with Tomi Adeyemi and her entire publishing story, and just like her story in general was really, really inspiring to me. And so I was really excited for this book. It's like one of the most hyped up books on booktube, or at least it was like a couple years ago. But like, I don't know how to talk about this book. I had really high expectations for it essentially, and it just fell short in almost every single aspect. Okay. I went into this book expecting and wanting to fall in love with a super rich and interesting world and to become obsessed with the cast of characters, but instead I got a world that was just okay and characters that annoyed me 90% of the time. I honestly think the only character that I wasn't really annoyed by was the main character's brother. And also, like, I didn't go into this book expecting a good romance because I think I had heard from people that the romance was kind of like lackluster, and that was like one thing that a lot of people didn't like about it. So I went into it not expecting a good romance, and I was still somehow let down by it. Like, I don't know how that happened. Just in general, the love interest was so annoying. He was so wishy-washy with his decisions. He would decide something one second and then completely change his mind on like the next page for no reason whatsoever. And so like just him not being able to make up his damn mind pissed me off so much. I'm like, just make a decision and stick with it. I don't want to have this back and forth with you. It's annoying. And then this book I feel like was very, very plot heavy, which I guess I kind of expected, but I was just expecting more from the characters in general. But I'm a character driven reader, and so if a book is just like all plot and just things happening like one thing after the other, I'm gonna get bored and I'm not gonna be interested, because if I do not care about your characters, you could have like the most exciting plot in the world and I still won't care if I do not like your characters. And because I didn't like the characters, I did not care about all these epic fights that were happening. Like I didn't care. Felt like one thing was happening after the other and I didn't care about a single thing. I did not care. I high-key wish I could have included this in my most disappointing books of 2020 video, but unfortunately I filmed that before I read this book because I genuinely was not expecting this book to be disappointing. I thought I was going to be absolutely obsessed with it, and I'm really let down. Like, I am so sad about this. Like, I don't think I've been this sad about not liking a book in a really long time. It did nothing for me. It did absolutely nothing for me. I'm so disappointed. You know, if any of you love this book and you are feeling disappointed that I didn't love it, just know that no one is more disappointed than I am that I didn't love this book, because I really wanted the sequel. Like, they're so beautiful on my shelf, and I'm really annoyed that I did not like this book. Like, genuinely, like, I am gutted that I did not like this book. I really thought that I was going to, and I just didn't. I'm mad. Okay, so that was all the books that I read in the month of December. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a huge thumbs up. Comment down below what you guys read in December. Subscribe if you've not yet already, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!